Hi everyone, my name is Bo Sanders, and today I want to ask, are denominations, like Methodism, antiques? I've been thinking about this question for quite a while, and along the way I have noticed that there are different kinds of antiques. Not all antiques are created equal. And so here are at least 5 kinds of antiques before we get to our consideration of denominations. There is a first category of antiques are ones that are more conversation pieces than anything. I think of this Stein, it's more kitsch. I have a shelf full of interesting conversation starters. Most of it's not useful. It's only an ornament. It's sort of for display and to get the conversation rolling or to set a tone. It's a bit of signals, either things that have been important to me in the past or sort of what I'm into. It's a way of displaying my personality. And so you have things like this Stein that are conversation pieces. I mean, it used to work. It used to serve a purpose for a celebration, probably Oktoberfest, but it's not that practical. But I'm not planning on getting rid of it just because I don't drink out of it. It's actually a really beautiful piece, and it attracts people's attention for conversation. I have all sorts of stuff like this. This is a shepherd's staff that my parents got for me when they went to Israel, and I love it. And it was created. It was actually, reproduced. It's not an actual shepherd's staff. Like used by shepherds, but it's made a reproduction to look like that, and so it was sort of special, and it was given to me, and I keep it over there in the corner to remind me as a pastor the agrarian roots of shepherding, and I love it. But I mean, I've never used it for sheep or anything really. It's really just a reminder. It was a gift. It's an ornament. It's really ornamental. Not that practical. I don't use it for the purpose for which it was intended, but it means something to me, and I like keeping it around. But it's a bit of an antique. A different category of antiques are working antiques that are really the attraction to them is that they're novel. And so I'm a bow hunter. I have a really elaborate mechanized bow that I actually hunt with. I can go more traditional with a recurve bow, but when you're really into something, sometimes you find an antique that attracts your attention and sort of piques your interest. And I found this bow. It's a handmade bow that is designed to utilize a bow that was actually discovered in a bog that's estimated to be 3,000 years old. And so this design of the straight bow was a 3,000-year-old design, and somebody actually wove the string. I would never take this hunting, right? It's designed and created as a novelty to harken back to an earlier time. So that's a different category. And then a couple more. You have the repurposed category, which is when somebody takes something that used to be utilized for one purpose and then changes it somehow and utilizes it in a different way. A couple examples of this would be when people take old ladders that you no longer want to walk up. I mean, they wouldn't hold your weight. They're not safe because, they make really good sturdy ladders now. And they'll repurpose it for different things. I've seen them used for bookshelves. You see this with like old casks that are repurposed as planters for flowers and stuff. So that's a category of repurposed. You modify it for use in something other than it was originally purposed. But you have another thing called the reproduction, which is, I remember the old push lawnmowers, and they were kind of novel for a while, and they can still be used, but people have actually created ones that are being produced presently, contemporary, that are quite elaborate and quite fancy. So you have reproductions. They're meant in some way to remind you of the thing that they're based on, but they're actually upgraded or tweaked in a way that gives them mechanical advantage and makes them more useful in the contemporary. Then there's a final one that I want to mention, which is when people don't know that they're antiques. So I was doing visitation, and I was on my way out at the very end of the visit, and I noticed in the entryway that there was an old rotary phone. And I said, oh, can can I touch this? And I said, sure. And I picked it up, and it had a signal. And I thought, you've got to be kidding me. So I sort of freaked out. I mean, I wasn't expecting it to be a phone that worked. And I said, it works? And this gentleman said, yeah, you know, it's been our phone. We've had it for 30 or 40 years. I don't remember what he said. And, you know, it works just fine. And I said, I'm freaking out because there are like 5 generations of landlines. I'm not even talking about cell phones, but of landlines, improvements in technology. I mean, you could have the push button, which is better than the rotary, the cordless, so you can wander around. You're not stuck in the entryway having the conversation. There's ones with caller ID so that you know who's calling in. And then there are ones with voicemail, I mean, the voice recording. But to just have an old rotary phone, I found utterly amazing. And his perspective was, until it stops working, why would I get a new phone? And I've always held on to that as an example of like, huh, yeah, I guess that's one way to do it. So having broken down that not all antiques are created equal, I just want to ask the question, are denominations, like Methodism, antiques? The answer is yes. But what kind of antique is it, is the real question. Because the simple fact is that denominations, especially those that were designed in Europe, right, with those state structures within Christendom, and Methodism fits that 300 or 400 years, right, in the tradition, that those frameworks of the institutional frameworks are antiquated. Now, are they working antiques? Are they novel, sort of niche? Is that their appeal? Can they be repurposed, tweaked, and updated for a purpose other than that which they were originally intended? Are there reproductions of them, right, that add new technology, but have the framework of the older model, but have integrated new technologies and updates? Or is it the case that they don't know that they are an antique and therefore in grave danger? The reason that I think about this is because my denomination that I trained with and was originally ordained with is called the CMA, Christian Missionary Alliance. And it is a uniquely American sort of, I mean, you could mistake it for being non-denominational, except that it's deeply denominational. But because it started out as a missions movement, it has those characteristics of really embracing, well, at least in the past, entrepreneurial spirit and innovation. And so it has that uniquely American aspect to it of being able to make decisions, invest money in ways to start new communities. It's different than even the way we change worship and we update and modify the expression of worship to reach new communities. And Methodism seems a little bit slower to do that. I always think of President Obama's analogy that when you turn an aircraft carrier, it happens so incrementally that if you're on the ship, you can barely even notice it. Methodism, and I would say many mainline denominations, are so big that they're having trouble making the turn. And here's why. They are set up to be elephants, to use Lyle Shaller's framing of church size. They are set up to be elephants, but they have become a cat. And so the framework, the bone structure, the scaffolding is set up for the type of institutional growth and health and vitality that we saw in the 1950s, not this decline narrative. And so there's a bit of an adjustment going on. Versus the denomination that I was telling you about earlier is a mouse and would love to be a cat. That's the difference. Is if the CMA had the numbers, the size, the congregations, the finances that the UMC has, it would be out of its mind. We would call it revival. But because Methodism is really set up to be an elephant in a mainline expression of the American church and is now not mainline but sidelined, it's having trouble in this identity with its antiquated infrastructure. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this, if that analogy works for you, if you have any good examples of this type of thing, maybe in your region or in your denomination. I would love to continue the conversation.